I guess the hearts mean you guys can hear me, right? Can you hear Bill? All right, all right. So we can roll here. Once I get everything ready to go, we're going to talk about some of the stuff going on and in my world and the books. So bear with me. I'll let a couple more people get in here. And I hope everybody's doing well. It's hot here for the first time in this year. It's actually hot instead of warm. So it'll be this will be an interesting one to be sure. I'm doing something new today, so um, I hope everybody enjoys my books. I hope everybody enjoys this writing, this reading. I've never read live any of my readings, so this is going to be an interesting little experiment this afternoon. So we'll see how this goes, and hopefully everybody enjoys it. So we'll jump into it, and some more people will jump in here shortly, I'm sure. Substack's kind of funny these days about how it lets people in and how it does everything. So we'll just roll with it for now. But let me do the opening first, because I'm gracious. I'll say his name since Bill's in here. I'm gonna be a little bit more relaxed today. Bill sent me a quote today that said, "You are asking the wrong questions. Before looking for reality in absolute terms, you ought to wonder why you operate with such limited concepts in the first place." And I think that sums up perfectly what most of my writing's about, what most of my books are about. I don't believe there's a lot of uh, definites in this universe, and I think the ones, even the definites that are out there, we don't have the capacity yet to understand. Um, we like to pretend we do. We like to pretend about certainty, and we like to believe that we know about things because it gives us a kind of clarity. So that quote is the question underneath both of the books I'll talk about today. Um, First, shame, because shame has been kind of an underlying current in a lot of my writing without me knowing that was the undercurrent. So um, many think of shame as emotion. Shame is not an emotion, not in the way that we use that word. In a very real and medical sense, shame is a biological event. When it hits you, your amygdala treats it as the same as a physical threat. It's the same system, it's the same response. And your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for language and logic, just jumps offline when that happens. Um, you cannot think yourself out of a shame spiral while it's happening because the thinking part of your brain has shut down. Your nervous system processes social rejection in the same region it processes physical pain. So to your body, being shamed and being punched in the face are the exact same thing. It's a vasoconstrictor. It changes your blood flow. It changes the temperature of your body. And that cold, that hollowness we feel is a real physical anomaly that is derived from shame. It's physiology. So the physical response is identical across every culture on Earth, which is interesting because this is not just an American thing. It's universal. Um, and scientists observed in instances of shame are we can't meet other people's gaze, our shoulders drop, our chin gets tucked into our chest. It's universal, which in some regards means that it's evolutionary. It's a signal to everyone else of our tribe that I submit, and please don't expel me. Along with that, shame is the primary driver of addiction. And I don't mean for the highs, I mean the low. I mean, people don't use to feel good. They use to stop feeling shame. And what's odd about that is then shame tells them they're unworthy of recovery, which deepens the cycle. It deepens how they use drugs. It deepens how they drink or use tobacco or sexual addiction or whatever they use to get through the shame. And it turns into a catastrophic loop. Um, Chronic shame keeps your cortisol elevated permanently, which degrades your immune system and increases inflammation and raises your cardiovascular risk. It doesn't just make you feel bad, it makes you sick. It kills you. It is, in almost every measurable way, another form of suicide. And psychologists call it a master emotion because it doesn't sit along other emotions or other feelings, it regulates them. If you feel anger, then you feel shame about the anger. If you feel grief, then you feel shame about the grief. It acts as the lid on your entire emotional life until you become a stranger to yourself. And the thing most people get wrong is most people think shame is just intense guilt, and it isn't. They're not even on the same spectrum. They're not even related in the way people assume. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. And that's not a subtle distinction. It's the difference between a thing you can fix and a thing that you cannot get away from. Guilt is adaptive. It leads to apologies and to making amends and to actual behavioral change. Shame does the exact opposite. The more shame a person bears, the less likely they are to change. What shame produces is lashing out and blaming others and withdrawal and hiding. And you don't become a better person through shame. You become a smaller, frailer, weaker person. You become meaner. You become more defended and more dangerous and more alone. And every system that has ever used shame as a tool, every religion, every ideology, every self-help movement that found a secular way to run the same script that told you shame was the path to becoming better is a lie. Shame does not refine you. It makes you an easier person to control. A person who believes they are fundamentally defective will pay anything. They'll comply with anything, and they will endure anything in exchange for the promise of being fixed. Shame is a survival mechanism that has outlived its usefulness. About 10,000 years ago, we're not tribal anymore. It doesn't make us better people. We have built an entire civilization and entire organizations on top of it. And we call that, with no small amount of idiocy, morality. And silence is the oxygen for that. It requires secrecy to survive. The moment you speak your shame to someone who can actually hear it, it loses its power. And that's one of the things I learned writing this book. And I've written some hard things in my life. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to sit down and put on paper, was this book, because I had to sit in a lot of my own shame. So that's exactly why every system that runs on shame teaches you explicitly and repeatedly with scripture or science or a mixture of both, that the shame is your burden privately, that speaking it is weakness, and that the appropriate response to feeling fundamentally broken is to work harder and say nothing, to keep quiet. So I've got two books that I'm going to talk about today. Such Pleasant Smells is the first one, which is the one completely about shame and how shame comes to us through inheritance. And with most things, when I talk about inheritance, I don't want that to be mistaken as a blame mechanism for parents or to shame people about their children. Um, it's nothing that we knew about. It's nothing that we control. And it's nothing dramatic. It's not a single thing. It's a thing that moves invisibly through proximity and through watching a parent's actions when somebody gets too close to something that the parent's ashamed about. A father doesn't teach his child to be ashamed. He just lives in the same house with them, and they learn, they watch, and they learn unconsciously through demonstration what shame does to a person, and then they internalize that. And by the time either of them has an understanding for what has passed between them, that ship has sailed. It's installed in them. So the second book, The Bastard Saint, is about the machinery that runs it. Religion got there first, of course, and they built a God small enough to be useful, weaponized your doubt, turned your questions into rebellion, and then your body into something requiring oversight. And I want to preface, and I'll go deeper into this. This is not a war on God or a war on religion, because there's plenty of people out there that want to do that. That's not I don't have a problem with God, and I don't have a problem with religion. I have a problem with some of the things that are taught. Um, but I will say, you know, even with self help, they stepped in and they refined the model, and they're doing the same thing the churches did, and with the shame, it's the same machinery. It's just a secular branding, and for many people, you're not broken because of God now, or you're not broken because of shame. You're broken because of your mindset or your limiting beliefs or your failure to do the work or whatever. The control structure is identical and the product is the same. A person who believes that the problem is them. Both systems run on shame. Both require your silence. Both need you to believe that the distance between who you are and what you're supposed to be is your fault, your failure, your project, and ideally that it's fixed by purchasing something from the people that identified the problem. So you ought to wonder why you operate with such limited concepts in the first place. Let's go back to that quote. It's very telling um, because we operate in this limited framework thinking that every generation of human thinks they've reached the pinnacle of civilization and that we've got it all figured out. And um, even, I've talked about this previously in a live. We have, in the sum total of human knowledge, a small fraction of 1% of all the knowledge that exists in the universe. Yet, and I'm not pointing fingers. There's a million writers and speakers and reverends and people running around saying we know the answer to everything, and you just can't. You just can't. You just can't. It's just ridiculous on the face of it. So when I wrote Such Pleasant Smells, the book uses a garden as its central image, as the central fact. And once you understand what I'm talking about with the garden, you'll see it everywhere. You'll see it in every person you know. You'll see it in yourself, probably. And I don't toot my horn often on my writing, but the response to this book has been nothing short of amazing. Text messages from people that are like this. I got one that says, I put the book down, but I could not walk away from it. And um, men my age, that said, I've never been able to see it until I read it in this book. So The garden is everything that looks like love from the outside. It's the tending and the rows and the blooms that people lean over your fence to admire in your yard. And that life from a distance looks complete. I wrote this book because I started seeing my own garden clearly for the first time after going through, and I'm not going back through everything. You can go read everything if you want to. But what I saw was shame had been present in my life. It had been present my entire life. Not always in some dramatic, identifiable way, but and not even a single thing. It was never one event. It was smaller than that, and therefore harder to see. It was like it was ambient. It was the atmosphere that I lived in and moved through every day. And in that atmosphere, in ways I didn't understand until I was this age, it had been making decisions that I thought I was making. And shame is very dangerous that way. It doesn't stand up and wave a flag and say, I'm here. I'm the reason I did that. It operates underneath. It lays the groundwork. You think you're choosing that job or that relationship of a way of acting or the distance that you keep from people who are trying to get close to you, but you're not choosing. You're responding to something that was installed in you so early and maintained so quietly by you that it long ago became indistinguishable from who you are as a person. It created doubt. And I don't mean the honest kind of doubt that makes you inquisitive. It creates the festering kind of doubt, the kind that lives in everything you build and slowly compromises the foundation of everything you're trying to build your life on. You doubt your own perceptions. You doubt your right to feel what you feel. You doubt whether the people who love you would love you if they actually saw you. And that is a tough sentence to say, because what the truth in that thing is that most of us, if we looked at another human being, have that doubt. If they really saw our innermost thoughts, if they really saw who we were as a person, if they really saw who we were as a human being, would they still love me? Would they still think I was a great person? Would they think I was an honorable person? Would they think I was a brilliant person? Would they think I was a great writer? Would they think I was a great father? Would they think I was a great anything? So that doubt doesn't sit still. It eats at you like a cancer. It created resentment, and a resentment I lived for years without being able to understand or even trace back to its source. Because resentment that comes from shame is strange. It doesn't have a target. It doesn't have a specific aim. It You resent the people who got close enough to almost see who you were, and you recoil from those people, which is an odd way to be. That the people that are trying the hardest to know you are the people you're shoving away because you're terrified that if they saw the real you, they'd reject you. And conversely, you resent the ones that won't try, that have just given up on you, because then you figure they don't feel you're worth it. You resent yourself for hiding. You resent yourself for being necessary, and resent anyone who seems to be living without that shame that you carry. The garden was the right structure for all this, because gardens are about tending and growing. And that's the word that keep coming back to me when I was trying to formulate how I wanted to talk about this, is tending, because that's what shame requires. It isn't just planted and disappears. It requires maintenance. You get up and you get right to your shame. Um, you cover up what surfaced overnight. You train the flowers back over their trellis. Uh, you you hide what's underneath. You water it, all of it, the parts that are real and the parts that are cover, and with the same hands. And after enough years, you can no longer tell which is which. And it looks like, from the outside, like devotion. It looks like love, like a man who gives himself completely to his life. And everybody from the outside is looking in and saying, how did you do this? and you just say, "I tended," because that's true. You are tending it. You're just not telling them the entire truth about what you're tending. It works because it holds two things at once without resolving. The beauty is real and the decay is real, and they are not separate from each other. The flowers are not a lie. The love is not a performance. The tending that you're doing is genuine. And underneath the flowers is the foulest shit in this garden. And the flowers are the most beautiful things that you plant on top of it. And both of those facts are true at the same time. And that's exactly what shame does to a life. It doesn't replace the good with bad, it grows through it, it becomes a part of it. You cannot pull it up without pulling everything else up with it. That's why this book is structured the way it is. It's not an argument. It's definitely not self-help. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a path to healing. It's a garden. It's something that you walk through. It's my garden, as close to real and in the moment as I could get it. And, you know, it's something you smell before you see. And that means both parts of the flowers and the decay. And it's something that requires you long enough to notice what's underneath the fragrances. And whether you're ready or not to know what's been planted there. So we'll get into that. Let's get into that book because that's the preface to it. Um, again, the book uses the garden as a central image, a central fact, and once you read it, you'll see it everywhere. Like I said, the first part I'll come is from the opening of the book. And for all intents and purposes, I wrote the book in third person, the man, but the man is me. And because that's the only way I really know how to speak about anything is, I don't write murder mysteries. I'm not John Sanford. I'm not some of these other guys. I write about me. So I'm just going to read some excerpts and we'll talk about them and we'll go from there. The first one from part one is, I tell you, this man's garden was a kingdom, not a kingdom of conquest, but a kingdom of ours. Every bloom in it was a promise he had kept. Every row was a sentence he had spoken to the ground, and the ground had answered. You do not pass a garden like this without knowing that a man has given itself to him completely. I tell you about the flowers that climbed the eastern wall the way a rumor climbs to a family, slowly at first and then everywhere. I tell you about his hands. They were not gentle hands. They were hands that learned gentleness the way a violent man learns prayer, slowly, over years, through a repetition so constant, it became a kind of faith. Again, the gardens are real. The roses are real. The labor is real labor. The love that went into it was genuine. The book isn't saying that it's all fake. It's saying that love and hiding grew from the same soil, tended by the same hands. So in the next section, it jumps into it and it says, but some mornings the keeper stood among his rows, and the beauty was not what reached him first. Some mornings it was the smell beneath the smell. The sweetness had a floor, and the floor was something dying. It was always something dying. That is what a garden is, a negotiation between what is growing and what is decomposing. And the decomposing never stops. It only gets covered. Bloom after bloom after bloom laid over the decay like a perfume on a body that has not been washed. Some mornings he envied the neighbors. They'd lean on the fence and they'd breathe it in and walk away carrying the scent of his garden the way you carry a song from a passing car, lightly, no cost. They didn't know they didn't know what the flowers were planted above. They didn't know what the roses along the gate were trained over ground that would make them cover their mouths if the roses were pulled. He saw a garden. They saw a garden. The difference was he knew what was underneath it. Somewhere years ago, the truths and the lies had grown into each other the way vines grow into a fence. until you cannot remove one without destroying the other. He could not pull the lies without killing the truths, and he could not tend the truths without feeding the lies. And see, so he tended all of it every morning without distinction, because distinction was a luxury he had surrendered so long ago he could not remember what it felt like to know which was which. So again, that's section one, which is the opening scene in the book. The prologue, because I'm going to jump back because I love that section, and it gets you right into the book. The prologue of this book is more of a letter. And again, I wrote it as the man so people can internalize it and digest this and read it and see themselves in it if they so choose. But the prologue is a book. This book is a letter written before the house wakes up, before anyone gets up, and it goes to everyone. His first wife, his current wife, his mother, his daughters, and what it's confessing is simple and brutal. The garden was locked before any of them even arrived. It didn't lock because of them, and it didn't lock in front of them. The gate to that garden was closed before any of these people had any say so in his life. So the first section is about the first wife. There was a woman before this one. I will not pretend she does not belong in this letter. I married her young, before I had any of the words I have now. Before I understood what I brought to our bed was already a garden, already locked, and already being tended in the dark by someone she would never meet. She never met me, not once, not on our wedding day, not on the day our life ended together, and not in any of the places in between. I gave her a husband. I did not give her myself. The failure of a marriage was not mutual. Some of it was, but not the foundational part. The foundational part was mine, and it was laid before she ever walked into my life. And the woman sleeping now, the woman sleeping behind me while I write this, every moment she felt something was wrong and couldn't find the words. She was right. She was feeling the distance. That distance was mine to create. I maintain it because showing her the truth felt from inside the fear like handing her a reason to leave. The truth is that the hiding was the reason. I handed it to her slowly, over years, in ways neither of us could see clearly. And I am sorry for that. And the sorry is not asking for anything. It is only the truest thing I have left to plant. Then there's what the book says about, children, about my children, This is the one I think that costs the most, so bear with me. Shame does not travel by being spoken. Shame travels by keeping hidden in the presence of a child. A father does not sit his daughter down and teach her to be ashamed. He lives near her, and she watches him, and she learns in the years before words that there is a way of being that involves withholding some part of him from the world. She does not know that she's learning, and that he does not know that he is teaching it. And by the time either of them have words for what has passed between them, it has already passed. The body learns first. The words come later to explain what the body already knows. I watched it take root. I saw the moment in each of them in their own way. And recognizing it meant admitting what I was. I wasn't ready. And by the time I was, the roots were already too deep. That line, I think, anchors the whole book right there. By the time I realized the roots were too deep. Another one that anchors the entire book, the love and the hiding were the same hands. And that's an important distinction to make, is that The hands we love with and the hands we hide ourselves from the world with are the same hands. They're capable of both at the same time. Um, Section 3 gets into masculinity, which is a big thing I talk about, and the things we don't say. Then there's a section of this book that's just confessions, short one, things that men are actually burdened with and don't say. And I want to read a few of those because they sound differently when I say them out loud than when I wrote them. Um, One of the preeminent ones is, we have been failing from man so long that we no longer remember what we were supposedly succeeding at. The mythological man, the strong father, the silent provider, the stoic soldier, the man who never flinches, the man who does not weep, the man who does not ask for help, the man who carries his family on his back and who dies at 65 of a heart attack and is eulogized. Sorry. As a good man, a solid man, a man's man. And we have inherited the instruction book for this man without inheriting the world in which he made any sense. And we have been trying to follow the instructions in a world that no longer rewards them. And we are failing. And we do not know that we are failing. We only know that we are tired. The next one, I've received about 10 comments from men who said this part of the book stopped them cold. I mean, dead cold. And it's something men, especially the world of masculinity, need to be able to say, um, which is, I want to be held. I want to be held without explanation. I want to be held without the need to justify the wanting, without having to frame it as a crisis. I just want to be held sometimes. I am a man in my late 50s and I want to be held. I do not ask for it because I do not know how to ask. I would not know what words to use. The words were never given to me. And that's the problem. Not that men aren't strong enough, not that we were never handed the words for what we actually want, or that we were never handed the words for what we actually want. And many of us are gonna die in that state with that wanting, that desire still in us, because we won't voice it to other people. And I'll leave that one. I'm not going to comment on that one any further. The next one is, the job you chose was the one that asked the least of the self you would have preferred to become, which is, I think, a strong one. You have been ashamed of your own mind for longer than you understood it was yours. The next, the you that exists when no one is watching is the one you are most frightened of. And that one I do want to pause on, because I think many people can relate to that. The person that you are when no one is staring at you, when nobody is watching you, is the person that you are most frightened of. And the last one is, you have secrets that will die with you, and you have made peace with that dying. Which is another powerful one. Section 4 of the book is another letter where he's walking out, and I'll just read it. I'm not going to go into a great bunch of detail. I'll just read it. The book ends with a man walking out of his garden, not to abandon anyone, to stop being the reason they can't move. I want to read the father first, because that's where the walking is done. Is obviously, from my viewpoint, is the father. My father is dead. He taught me how to walk out by doing it in front of me, one sentence at a time, in the last years of his life. I did not understand what I was seeing at the time. I only understood that the closer he got to his own shame, the closer he got to me. I mistook the closeness for some kind of reconciliation, but it wasn't. It was a demonstration. He was showing me the path, but he did not live long enough to see me find it. Every year I knew him was a year he was further out than the year before. We grew closer every year of his walking, because a man walking out of his walls becomes available in a way the walled man never can. He had been teaching me the only thing worth teaching: speak the shame, say it out loud, and watch your shoulders square. And I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't think he made it all the way out. I think he was still walking out when he gave out. Um, what I really didn't understand is, until I stood at my own gate, was that the walking in itself is the lesson. It's not the destination. The walking itself. Um, the next section of the book is the letter of the wife, which is, I think, the emotional peak of the book, in a lot of senses, um, because she knows he is leaving. She has known it for longer than this morning. She has known it in the way a person knows something that they've yet to be told, by the small changes in a life that betray a fact the mouth has not yet said. She thinks, if I call him back, I save the marriage and I lose him. If I let him walk, I may lose the marriage, and I do not know what I say. She thinks, he knows this. He knows I could call him back. He knows he would come. He is walking anyway. He is not walking because he does not love me. He is walking because he loves me enough to refuse to keep being the lie. The walking is the first true thing he has done. And the first true thing he has done is leaving. She doesn't yet She doesn't know yet whether she can love the man who is becoming. She only knows the man who was. She is at the edge of making a sound. She is at the edge of making either sound, stay or go. And she does not yet know which one will come. That's it for that book. And if you haven't, that's all I can bear of that one today. Like I said, it's a very personal book. I urge you to go get this book. It's worth the effort. It's worth the read. It's been referred to as my masterpiece. I think that's was a blessing, and maybe a little bit of truth, because it's about as deep into myself as I can get at any given time. So we're going to transition to the second book, because this one's been a long one. The second book is a bit louder. It's a bit more me. It goes after the system that built the garden in the first place. Um, the people who handed you a version of God that constructed to keep you quiet, the institutions that took your doubt and told you it was the enemy, that took your anger and told you it was a sin. Such Pleasant Smell shows you what's in you. The Bastard Saint, which is the other book, I changed it now. I wrote this book a while back, and it was called Holy Hell. But I changed the title, and I added some parts to it because I wasn't satisfied with it, and I wasn't as clear as I wanted to be, and I felt like it came out to be more accusatory, than I wanted it to be. I want to be clear that it's not a fight with God or religion. For many years, I think I did that, and then as I got older and wiser, as they say you are, um, I realized that I believe in something underneath and behind all of this. And I'm aware that those words are almost comically inadequate, which is precisely the point. The universe is roughly 14 billion years old and contains more stars than there are grains of sand on every beach on this planet. And it has produced, among other things, the platypus, the Mariana Trench, and music. So the idea that any human institution, particularly one running a fog machine and a giving app, has that something cataloged, explained, and available for $19.99 with free shipping should be self-refuting. It's not. It's $1 billion industry, and it is an industry, which is my frustration with it. Um, it's $1 billion industry that paid almost no taxes last year, while its pastors flew private planes, and the congregation is eating in food banks. It's $1 billion industry that has more political lobbyists than teachers. It's an organization that has been credibly accused of covering up child sexual abuse in numbers that dwarf what we know about the Catholic Church. And somehow that sentence alone has not produced the outrage that it even remotely deserves. I cannot wrap my head around it. And what it does instead is keep you looking at yourself instead of at it. What I won't claim is that I have the capacity to understand what exists beyond this. I don't. Neither does you. Neither does anyone else. The honest position, the only defensible one, is that we are creatures of genuinely staggering limitation, standing in front of a mystery that we cannot even see to the edge of. The church's position is that they have a pamphlet, that the God who authored 14 billion years of cosmic expansion chose to make his definitive statement through men in suits in Houston, Texas, with a Netflix special and a teleprompter. That's not faith. That is a machine. And that one that runs on shame, the way that an engine runs on fuel. It extracts money as its primary output and keeps the people inside it too frightened of themselves to look clearly at what's happening around them. A machine that endorsed slavery when slavery was profitable. It endorsed segregation when segregation was comfortable. It told women that their misery and their suffering was holy. It told gay children that they were broken. It told abuse survivors that forgiveness was their job and that silence was their testimony. And now, in what may be the least subtle chapter of its entire history, it has endorsed a system of government that and a man publicly in prayer publicly in prayer on bended knee for everything that Jesus claimed against, everything he preached against. Men who have been found liable for sexual assault, men who have been found guilty of rape, men that have been found guilty of abusing children, men who have paid hush money, men who have done horrid things. They laid hands on these men. They anointed them. They called them chosen. Jesus flipped tables over these people. And the modern evangelical movement has set up a merch booth next to it. They'd love it if you buy Jesus is my cardio tank top or a Bible cover styled like a designer handbag or a Let's Go Brandon devotional journal or an AR-15 with Psalms 144:1 engraved on the receiver. Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war. That option is available to you right now today with overnight shipping. No one in the production chain stopped to ask whether the man that died broke and homeless would want his name on a weapon designed to kill people more efficiently. There's a pastor in Texas right now who drives a Bugatti. A Bugatti. His congregation is mostly working poor. He has told them, I'm not taking this out of context, from the pulpit, that their poverty is a faith problem, that their suffering is a belief problem, that God is trying to blend them, and doubt is the dam. Doubt is what's killing them. He's not an outlier and either. He is the logical conclusion of the system that we have built. No one no one really stops to ask this because there's money to be made. For the better part of 2,000 years, we have been killing each other over whose understanding of God is correct. We had the Inquisitions, we had the Crusades, we had the pogroms, the suicide bombers, church bombings, children in mass graves, deaths hidden for centuries, names unknown, and families destroyed. If the being at the center of all this had a strong opinion about which side would win, he has the means to settle it. The Bible includes the parting of the seas and the raising of the dead. And if he wanted that record corrected, the record would be corrected. He's not corrected it, which leaves two possibilities. Either he cannot, or he does not care in the way we've been told he cares. Neither of those possibilities support the franchise. And again, it is a franchise. Neither of them justifies a preacher driving a Bugatti while his parishioners starve. Neither of them explains why your doubt is the problem and certainty is not. That is the bastard saint. It's a book I wrote, and we're going to take part in a little bit today. Again, I want to preface this, say this is not about me going to war with God. This is not about me going to war with religion. I think that the Eastern sects of Christianity have kept faith with religion. I think, especially the African sects have held more tightly to what is preached. But I want to talk specifically what's done in this country by these people to men like us, and it does come from some anger. You can tell I'm a little bit animated, and I've talked about this before, and again, I want to go back and say I don't blame people, I don't blame my family, I don't blame anybody for handing me this. It just I got to the age where I was examining this, and if you read the Bible, which I think is a great book, um, it's got poems, it's got poetry, it's got songs, it's got the Psalms, and you take it for what it is. It's a marvelous piece of literature. I do not believe I have to stone my wife. I do not believe I have to stone my daughter because she's impure. I don't believe I have to do any of these crazy things. I just think we need to treat it as the literature it is. So the church has tried to own this question that I talk about all the time for 2,000 years. And they've built entire institutions around answers that they dressed up as questions. They burned people that asked different questions. And we're still asking those questions. The book is kind of me living it now. So I'm going to read some from this book and discuss a lot of it. It begins with "Your God is too small," which I think is very apt. The God most of us were handed in the church, and I mean the specific version sold from pulpits and bumper stickers and whatever the pastor's brand happened to be, that God was built small on purpose. Not humble small, useful small, small enough to fit inside a sermon, small enough to justify what the institution needed justified. A God who somehow always landed on the same side of every political argument as whoever was holding the microphone. The God you were taught to believe in is pathetic. Literally pathetic. A shrunken, neutered, domesticated deity who obsesses over your or sexual thoughts but could not care less about genocide. A God who's intimately concerned about whether you masturbate but completely silent on whether or not you exploit your workers. A God who demands that you tithe 10% but doesn't seem bothered by the fact that 3 people in this country own more wealth than the entire bottom half of humanity. Now, the prosperity gospel is just where you go when this logic is pushed far enough. If you shrink God far enough, you get a God that fits inside your safe deposit box, a God who measures your faith by your net worth. If you're poor, you don't believe hard enough. If you're rich, God loves you more. That's not the theology. That's what is being preached. That is a pyramid scheme with a cross. I don't know any other way to put it. Another section of the book, if your God always agrees with you, you didn't discover him, you made him up. You took your own beliefs and your own biases and your own political preferences and you gave them a divine stamp of approval. You called this God, and now you think you're hearing the voice of the universe instead of hearing your own echo in a church. A small God, cannot survive questions, which is exactly why the church taught you not to ask any. Another section of the book, the small God can't survive scrutiny. He won't survive actual reading of the text, and he definitely will not survive questions. So the church teaches you not to ask questions. It trains you that doubt is the enemy. It conditions you to think that your critical thinking is rebellion. Because if you actually looked at the small God, if you actually compared him to what's written in the Bible you're supposed to believe in, you'd realize it's a fraud. And that realization is where everything starts to fall apart. Um, and I think that is very apt for me. Um, the next one, section about prayer, is where it got personal for me because I did it for years. I still do it. It's just habit now. Um, I didn't understand what I was doing until I actually stopped it because you learn the mechanics before you're old enough to ask what those mechanics really mean. Close your eyes, bow your head, a certain reverent tone of voice, say things that sound spiritual. And you get that positive feedback when you do it right, which means you learn fast what right prayer looks like, not what's honest, what performs. And a piece I wrote a while back about that was, me talking to whatever's out there, and you call it God, call it universe, angry, and if it can't handle me angry, then really what kind of deity is it? Um, but what church taught you is that prayer is transaction. You confess and God forbid or forgives. You ask and God provides. You give, God returns it multiplied. That system is neat, it's predictable, and you knew exactly what you were supposed to do and what results you'd get. Except the results never come, and nobody can really explain why. Or worse, they can explain why, and that answer's always the same. You did not believe hard enough. Your faith is weak. A teenager prays every night to stop being gay. Nothing happens. He's told his faith is a problem. The attraction doesn't go away because it was never broken in the first place. But now he has a system that turns his own nature into a spiritual failure. He spends a decade trying to fix something that was never wrong. That is weaponized prayer. That's the mechanism installed and called devotion. Prayer got weaponized. When you confess something to a pastor, that information does not stay private. Your struggle becomes leverage. Your vulnerabilities become data. The church positioned itself as the place where you could be honest and then use that honesty against you. A woman stays in an abusive marriage and prays about it instead of leaving. Every time she thinks about escape, she prays instead. She prays for the strength to endure. She prays that God will change her husband. She prays that she'll be a better wife. The church validated this. This is what is labeled faith in our world now. They disguised it as submission. What it actually was a way to keep her trapped while making her feel spiritual about it. If prayer feels like a transaction instead of a conversation, if it feels like a performance instead of a connection, if it feels like someone's watching and judging every word you say, that's not prayer. That is control. Um, I go deeper to it in the book because I think performative prayer in our society has become a thing that is absolutely one of the most atrocious things out there. I think whether you're Christian or not, the public displays of prayer in our government and in schools when there's actually no frigging work done to resolve the issues is the most disgusting thing and one of the most disgusting aspects of our society now. I'm not going to get into thoughts and prayers because I'll let you buy the book and read that. But there's that I could actually legitimately puke. Um, we it just gets uttered in everything. School shooting, thoughts and prayers. People, a few soldiers get blown up in Afghanistan or Iran, thoughts and prayers. It, it it's it, it it's too much. So Section 7, don't call that peace. They sold peace like it was a product, and the product, make no mistake about it, is silence. Anytime someone in the congregation gets uncomfortable or starts asking questions or starts noticing something's off, the answer is always the same. Let it go, give it to God, be at peace, which means shut up and stop making this awkward. Now, I want to go back to this because Jesus flipped tables. He screamed at religious leaders in public. He said things that got him killed. He made enemies on purpose because he understood that some situations require enemies. And the institution took that man and turned him into a reason to swallow whatever was happening to you. Turn the other cheek, you know, give it to God. All these little phrases, that's not peace. That is you being silenced. They took the most radical, disruptive presence in the entire Bible and turned him into a sedative for the uncomfortable, a holy excuse to swallow every injustice and smile like they just didn't cut your throat. Then they'd come at you with forgiveness, which is a word they use like a chokehold. You got hurt, forgive. You were betrayed, forgive. Someone in leadership abused a child and the elders covered it up and nobody goes to jail, forgive. Turn the other cheek. We're all sinners, which apparently means that consequences are unchristian. It means that accountability is vengeance. We see that used every day now. We are pressured to forgive, and accountability is nowhere to be found. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody is punished. Nobody loses their job. Nobody goes away. It, the children are punished. The children suffer. The women that were raped suffered. And I'm not just talking about our current administration. I'm talking about our history of Western evangelical. It's always the victims that pay the price. And we are pressured to forgive the transgressor. It gets weaponized. The victim's job is to absolve and pretend nothing happened while the abuser keeps preaching and is protected by a system that treats that silence, that covering up, as holiness. Now, that's not forgiveness. Biblical forgiveness comes after repentance. It comes after someone admits what they did and they changed. Nowhere in the Gospels does Jesus say forgive them while they're still holding the friggin' knife. Institutional Christianity doesn't care about biblical forgiveness, though. It cares about order, and more importantly, it cares about reputation. Real peace doesn't require you to stop thinking. It doesn't demand the suppression of your instincts, or in my case right now, your anger. Real peace is what happens when you stop pretending, when you look at what you've been fed and say no, when you walk out of a building and feel for the first time like you're truly breathing. And then in a because I've got daughters, it's an important facet for me. I did a part about women, and I want to talk about this part of this book about what the system did specifically to women. And I'm not going into great detail because I don't want to read the whole book. But there's so much of the purity culture. I think is one of the sickest ones because it gets discussed like it's a policy error. It's deliberate. The submission theology, the modesty doctrine, the virginity pledges. This isn't the system failing. This is the system working as it was designed. Because biblical womanhood almost always means submission, domesticity, modesty, and silence. They trot out the same three verses from Paul's letter and ignore everything else in the Bible. Deborah was a judge and a military leader. Jael killed a general with a tent peg in the skull. Priscilla taught Apollos, who was already a preacher, because he had his theology backwards. The Bible is full of women who did not stay quiet. They did not stay at home and did not defer to the nearest man. But that doesn't fit the branding, so it gets ignored. There's the purity balls. There's a section of the book, and then there's the purity balls. Now, I want to let that phrase hang out for a second. Fathers take their teenage daughters to formal events, white dresses, ballroom, slow dances, where the girls pledge their virginity to daddy until he hands them off to a husband. They wear tuxedos. They gaze into their daughter's eyes, receive promises, and sign a contract about hymens. The daughter signed pledges, literal documents promising to keep themselves pure for their future husbands. Men are expected to sow their oats. We're just guys. Women go out and do it, and they're a used piece of bubble gum. We're expected to do the crazy stuff. We're expected to act up. Women do it, and they're whores. They're thrown out. They're gossiped over. It's an absurdity. The daughters signed pledges, literal documents promising to keep themselves pure for their future husbands, and the father signed too, promising to protect their daughter's purity. They guard the treasure until ownership transfer is complete. Read that again. Ownership transfer. That's what they're calling it. The daughter is a parcel. The wedding is a closing. And the ceremony at 14, that's just the title search. It's treating women like property. You were at a dinner in a tuxedo discussing the unbroken state of a child's body. And let's not overdress that. A child's body. They hire DJs. This whole modesty doctrine runs alongside it. Elders spending their Wednesday night adjudicating whether 16-year-old leggings are too tight. 40-year-old men in volunteer positions conducting what amounted to a runway review of children, and they call this the Lord's work. And on the face of this, the modesty doctrine is pornographic. It treats every female body as inherently sexual, constantly dangerous, perpetually about to cause a man to sin. It teaches men to see women as sexual objects by insisting that women cover themselves up so men won't see them as sexual objects. And I want to stop there because, again, men are taught to see women as sexual objects. They are taught to see them as the downfall. They are taught to see them as the flaw in their makeup. They're not taught to fix themselves. They're not taught to guard their own actions. They're taught that the woman is the problem. This logic devours itself. Modest is hottest. They say it like a bumper sticker, and they don't hear themselves. They've eroticized the concealment and then blame the woman for being attractive while concealed. Then come the girls who broke the rules, or they were perceived to. Uh, Again, this is from the book. They are not horrified when you fall. They are excited. Now comes the good part. Now comes the shaking voice and the mascara running and the I just want to be honest with you all, while 300 people lean up closer in their seats like it's the season finale or something. This is the show. This is what they built the whole system for. Sin is the harvest. They grow it in shame until it's ripe and pick it in public where everybody can have a taste. The altar call is a kink. Don't tell me it isn't. The lights go down, the music gets softer, the pastor's voice drops a few octaves into that slow, soft register. Come forward. Don't hide anymore. Let me see you. Let us all see you. And again, the men who watch porn, get addicted to porn, they get a private support group. The women who create sexual or have sexual transgressions get the stage. They get the spotlight. They get to come up in front of the church and confess. Because they want, and again, they want the whore turned into a saint, the stripper saved by grace, the slut redeemed. Give them the details, the man, the choices. Let them picture it. Let them tell them how Jesus pulled you out of the pit. Let them watch you cry about what you used to be. Let them feel superior. Let them get off on your degradation while calling it worship. But you better stay low. You're redeemed, but you're not pure, and you never will be again. Not really. You'll be introducing yourself as a former fuck up forever. They want you managed. Healed women don't perform shame on command, and healed women aren't useful. I think that part speaks to all of us. Healed human beings, whether to the church or the self-help industry, first and foremost, are not customers. They're not useful. They don't pay. And our society has turned our pain, our grief, our misery, our discomfort, whatever you want to call it, into profit, into a profit stream. Then we go back to the book. When he hurts her, when he controls the money, when he isolates her from family, screams at her, hits her, coerces her, treats her like property, the church tells her to pray harder, to submit more, to win him over with her gentle and quiet spirit, to stay. They tell her leaving would be a sin. They tell her God hates divorce. They put responsibility for abuse on her shoulders and call it biblical womanhood. Pastors have counseled women back into the arms of men who eventually killed them. This has happened multiple times. Documented cases of women that sought help from their spiritual leaders and were told to go home and be better, and were killed for it. The theology of submission put them in the grave. And again, I want to keep stepping about this. I'm not saying this is every church. I'm not saying this is every preacher. I'm not saying this is God. I'm not saying it's every aspect of religion. I'm saying it's a sickness in our society that needs to be recognized, because this has a body count. These are real human beings. These are actual bodies. These are the same people who built the system that produced those deaths are still selling the system that produced those deaths. Your silence is the product. Your body is the inventory. The shame is currency. They printed, they spent it, and they have been collecting rent on you since you were small enough to fit in a Sunday school chair. I when you get further in the book, I don't want to keep this going too long, but if you get further into the book and it fills out, you'll see where I'm going with a lot of this. There is a lot of anger in it, but it's justified anger. And if you've been reading me for a while and you go back to some of my former pieces, you'll see some of the things I really got aggravated about with the church. The next chapter is about my letter, because it's not a prayer, and I don't know how to properly pray anymore, and I'm kind of done pretending I do. I don't do sermons either. It's what I wish someone had told me when I was still sitting in those pews, learning that my own voice was dangerous. They told me to pray while they stole. They told me to sing while they lied. They told me to keep my head down so I wouldn't see what they were doing. And it worked for years. I believed, not casually, not the way people believe in good luck or karma. I believe the way a child believes in a parent, completely, desperately, stupidly, with everything I had and nothing held back. I talked to God in the dark when I was a kid, and I was terrified of hell. That's how they got me. An eternal conscience torment for the crime of being born. Original sin. I laid awake shaking, begging to be saved from a punishment I couldn't understand for sins that I haven't even committed yet. This is a child terrified of infinite torture. And they sat there and said, "This is wonderful. This is the good news." They policed my sexuality like they owned the deed to my body. They made my desires into demon. I learned, first and foremost, to be afraid of myself, to monitor my own thoughts for sin, to feel shame for things that weren't shameful in the least. They didn't just teach purity, they taught me that my own flesh was the enemy. Do you know what it's like to leave a system and still flinch at certain songs or certain prayers or certain words or certain places? You understand intellectually that it was wrong, but your body still reacts. And again, we're right back to the shame thing earlier. They knew. They knew. And again, I'm not blaming parents, and I don't want parents to read this and feel guilty as hell because their children went to church, because they were taught the same thing. It's a system so effective that it gets into you below the level that beliefs can reach. The belief doesn't work. You get so into it that you can't get out of it. Now, I walked away, not because I fell away, not because I backslid. I considered I escaped. I recognized what was happening and I got out. And I'm sure people are still saying that I'm confused. I'm not confused. I'm not in a season. I'm awake. For the first time in my life, I am actually awake. And the whole thing comes down to this: get out, trust yourself, believe in what you see. If something feels wrong, it is. If someone is using shame to keep you compliant, they're not representing love. If a system requires your silence to survive, it deserves to die. If it costs you your voice, it is not holy. If it shames your body, it is not sacred. If it tells you that abuse is love, burn it to the ground. Now back to the quote that I started off. You are asking the wrong questions. Before looking for reality in absolute terms, you ought to wonder why you operate with such limited concepts in the first place. The garden is a limited concept. Absolutely. The small God is a limited concept. The peace that they sold you is a limited concept. The forgiveness that they weaponized are limited concepts. The prayer that's theater is all of it is limited concepts handed to us by people that needed us to be small enough to manage, small enough to hold, and small enough to keep milking for profit. So um, it was named Holy Hell. It's now called the Bastard Saint. I actually got my image on there because I'm a semi decent looking dude. Um, and I won't screw up your bookshelf too much. So uh, I ask you to go get the book and read the rest of it because it gets a lot heavier. I think the ones on here that have read it will tell you it never lets up. Um, I do go into I added a chapter because I do want to acknowledge that there are portions of the church that are, I think, doing much better. There are portions of Christianity that are fulfilling the mission that was set out in the Bible. I think there are sects that are doing the job and haven't done um, some of the hard things that precise American the American evangelical churches have done. Um, the best chapter in the book, and I didn't read it here because I want everybody to read it, is that original sin is bullshit. Mostly, the concept of original sin doesn't appear in the Bible. It never appeared in the Bible. There's nowhere it says that in the Bible. No child was born diseased or sinful or not complete enough. That was invented by Augustine in the 14th century because Augustine was Augustine was kind of a freak, and he wanted absolution for his crimes, and the only way he could see that he thought he was a really holy dude. He said the only way that this can happen to me, who's a holy dude, is if everybody was infected by this. So he created this doctrine of original sin. Um, and then I want to go back to the Such Beautiful Smells because it's my first book with pictures. It's got some great pictures, some great imagery in it. Obviously, it's an emotional book. Um, I'm not going to apologize because it was an emotional book to me. Um, and it means a lot to me. And it may be my masterpiece because this book has more of me in it than anything I think I've ever written in my life. And I certainly appreciate everybody showing up. And until next time, and maybe I'll break out some chapters. I got my other books, but you can go find those. I've been pushing those. I thank everybody for the success of um, Such Pleasant Smells and Bastard Saints. That Pleasant Smell just sold its 200th copy, which is the most I've ever. It's more than I've sold of everything else combined. So it's obviously meaning something to some people, and got some more things coming out, some more podcasts. So I appreciate everybody, and I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thank you for coming. Unless anybody has questions. Anybody got any questions? I should ask before I hang up. All right, guys. Have a wonderful night. I hope you do well.